Imagine catching up with an old friend over drinks, and he asks a simple question. How often do you see your parents? Maybe once a year, you say. And how old are they? Mid-60s? He does the math out loud, and it lands like a punch. 15. You will likely see your parents about 15 more times before they die. That single sentence, spoken over drinks in May 2021, is the reason a private equity investor walked away from his career and wrote one of the most talked about books on wealth in years. The man's name is Sahil Bloom, and he hadn't spent his life chasing minimalism. He'd built exactly the life he was told to want. A baseball scholarship to Stanford, a shoulder injury that ended that dream overnight, and then a pivot toward the only scoreboard he'd ever really been taught to trust: money. A family friend once told him that within a decade in finance, he'd be making more money than he knew what to do with. And Bloom believed him. So, he chased it. Into six-figure paychecks. Into a house in California, 3,000 miles from the parents who raised him. By 30, Bloom had it all: the title, the car, the house, and he felt almost nothing. Psychologists call this the arrival fallacy, the false belief that reaching a goal will finally deliver lasting happiness. He had arrived, and all he could think was, is this it? The itch didn't fade. It just found a new target. One more bonus, one more promotion, one more reason the finish line kept sliding forward. He'd seen this same emptiness in people with far more money than he had. A friend who'd sold his company for $100 million rented a yacht to celebrate, a reward for a lifetime of work. The moment the guests stepped aboard, someone glanced at a larger yacht docked nearby and said, "I wonder who's on that one." The joy drained out instantly. Harvard research backs this up. Ask millionaires how much more money would finally make them happy. And almost everyone, whether they're worth 30 million or 300 million, gives the identical answer: 2 to 5 times more than they already have. There's always a bigger boat. So Bloom went looking for a different way to keep score. He kept coming back to a simple management idea. What gets measured gets managed. Strap on a sleep-tracking ring, and within days, your entire identity starts bending around your sleep score. For most of modern life, money has been the only thing we track closely. So unsurprisingly, it's the only thing our daily decisions optimize for. We win that one narrow battle and quietly lose the much bigger war: our time, our relationships, our health, our sense of purpose. That realization became the spine of the book. Not one scoreboard, 5. Time, wealth, the freedom to spend your hours how you choose. Social wealth, the depth of your relationships. Mental wealth, purpose and ongoing growth. Physical wealth, your health and vitality. And financial wealth, the money most of us were taught to chase alone. Bloom isn't arguing that money is meaningless. He's arguing it was never meant to be the whole scoreboard, only one column on it. Here's the test Bloom uses to catch people lying to themselves, including himself. There are the priorities you'd say you have, and there are the priorities your calendar and your bank statement actually reveal. The gap between those two lists is usually where an unhappy life is quietly hiding. And the fix isn't to flip a switch and disappear to a cabin in the woods. Bloom describes it as a dimmer, not an on-off switch. You don't have to shut off your health or your friendships to chase a promotion. You just have to stop letting them go completely dark while one dial gets cranked all the way up. Of the 5, one kept showing up as a multiplier for all the others: physical health. Not because a number on a scale matters most, but because of what taking care of your body proves to your own brain. Every workout you actually finish becomes evidence that you can set a goal and follow through. And that belief doesn't stay in the gym. It bleeds into your work, your finances, your relationships. Physical wealth, in Bloom's telling, is really a wealth of self-trust. To build the book, Bloom didn't just read theory. He tracked down people in their 80s and 90s and asked every one of them the same question: what would you tell your younger self? Combined, their answers held over 1,000 years of lived experience. His grandmother, once a princess of a small kingdom in India, told him never to fear sadness because it tends to sit right next to love. A man married 70 years told him to say, "I love you," every single night, because someday the other side of the bed will be empty and you'll wish you still could. Across dozens of these conversations, spanning every background imaginable, almost no one mentioned money. Bloom didn't just write about change, he lived it. Within weeks of that dinner conversation, he'd quit his job. Within a month, he and his wife had sold their California house and moved 3,000 miles east back toward their parents. A year later, they welcomed their son. One afternoon, pushing the stroller down the sidewalk, an elderly stranger stopped him and said his own daughter, the one he once carried just like this, was now 45 years old. "It goes by fast," the man said. "Cherish it." That's the whole argument of the 5 types of wealth in a single image. A stranger on a sidewalk, watching someone else live the chapter he already finished. You don't get to redo your 15 visits, but you do get to decide, starting today, what you're actually measuring your life by. So here's the question Bloom would ask you right now. If someone did the math on your time, your people, your health, your purpose, and your money, would you like the number they gave you?